Okay, hello. This video is to demonstrate and track the progress on a restoration of an old 1948 Supro. Um, this is a very tiny amplifier. It's kind of hard to get a perspective of how tiny it is until you consider that this is a 6-inch speaker. So the entire amp isn't any more than maybe 12 inches across, something like that. Maybe, if it's lucky, maybe a foot tall. But a cute little thing, cute little guy. When I got this, it had the handle had been painted white. I guess it had cracked before, and the previous owner thought maybe, oh, I'll make it match the Tolex here, or well, this isn't Tolex. It's like a faux leather of some sort. But I guess they thought they would be clever and try to make that match. So I'm going to replace this handle. They drilled some extra holes. By the look of it, they were trying to accommodate maybe like a 6x9 speaker or something, because they didn't have a 6-inch. So I'll have to fill these holes and paint those white to kind of help them blend in and disappear. And we will remove these little plugs and put a 6-inch speaker back in this thing. When I got it, it had this kind of kitchen cloth as stuck in there as grill cloth. Pretty funny looking. Here is the chassis itself, and we can see here it's got the original output transformer, and you can see numbers on there. Numbers dating to 1947, 25th week. Original power transformer, no numbers on that. We have the original can capacitor by Mallory, and it has a 235816 code on it. You can barely see there, for 1948. All the original components. Looks like it pretty much hasn't been adulterated, with the exception of excuse me, pardon the camera work, with the exception of this little jack here, which is supposed to be a speaker out jack or a headphone out jack. I don't think that's original to the amp. They've just crudely kind of run it to the output transformer. This thing didn't have a speaker in it when I got it, and I don't know if they were just using it for or trying to use it with headphones or what, but obviously I don't think that's correct. I've only seen one other example of this exact amp, and it had already sold, and I couldn't really get any close-up pictures, so I don't know. It didn't have this jack, but I don't know, whether or not they made some with and without it. Probably this is not original. So yeah, a couple here are the old caps. All the old caps are original. I mean, this doesn't have any more than, we can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, about 8 resistors, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 capacitors. So there's almost nothing to this. That's the original 1948 date coded pot as well. There's no on-off switch. There's just a volume, 2 input jacks, and a fuse. And that's it on this little guy. The tube complement is 6SL7 for the preamp, 6V6, and a 5Y3. On the inside of the amp, we have a handy little schematic, and the schematic is a number 510-8 chassis, as we can see there, dated 11/22/1947, and it's about as simple as it gets in terms of lack of components. I mean, there's only a handful of things in this amp. So yeah, it should be pretty simple to try to fix, though, because of that. We can see here there is a piece of wood here That was a channel was sliced into this one piece of wood, and on this side it has broken off where they sliced that channel, and they would have stopped about here, but the upper portion is broken off, so I'm going to make a piece of wood to go up there to replace that. We're going to get some grill cloth. We will replace the handle, and probably the handle, either we will take the paint off of these, or we will just replace them. I think I have another spare pair of them. Either way, we'll get those back to original state. One of the feet on this thing is broken as well, so I will get a set of feet for this as well to put back on it. Some of the Tolex is peeling, or the faux leather is peeling along the side, peeling up just a little bit, so I'll get that glued back down nice and straight. But yeah, this should be a pretty cool one. So stick around. We'll see how it turns out. Okay, we're back with this little 6-inch Supro combo here, and I've gotten a few things repaired. I've actually gotten a new speaker in, which I'll show momentarily. I've replaced grill cloth, which I'll also show. I've put the output transformer, mounted it to the top, replaced the handle, which we'll show momentarily, but this is to show the guts. You can see here these old Chicago Condenser Corporation capacitors. Now, I've tried so far to bring this up on a Variac with limited success last night. I really didn't have the time to stick with it, so I'm going to try again today to bring it up on a Variac and see if I can salvage this original electrolytic here. My guess is I'm not going to be able to. This thing is from 1947, and this is probably just a moot point to even try, but we may as well go ahead and see what will happen. Now, I was able to actually get sound out of the amp, and it sounded pretty quiet. I got it up to about 50 volts or so on the input last night before I needed to go to bed, and I didn't want to leave it running all night for risk of fire with an amp this old. So I went ahead and shut it slowly back down, and we'll try again today to bring this electrolytic, bring everything back up to full power and see if we can salvage this electrolytic. I'm not so sure we can. The reason I'm skeptical that we can, in the process of bringing it up last night, I heard a couple of just strange noises, a couple of little pops and things, and I'm thinking that this might be dead. Not sure yet, so we will see on that. But this will at least show what's been done so far. We have a new 3-prong power cord here, which I'm grounding at this point. Of course, we're still going through the fuse. The other side of the 3-prong is going now through a switch rather than straight to the output tube. The switch I went ahead and installed. I have a whole bunch of old switches, probably even from around this era or the 50s, and I installed an older switch here in the spot where someone had actually drilled a hole for an output for the from the output transformer. So this was actually speaker out before someone had put that in, and this amp had no on-off switch. You just actually, and there wasn't even a switch on this. You actually just plug it or unplug it from the wall to turn it on and off. So this was pretty much the epitome of simplicity. I mean, there is even some amps that from this era that didn't even have volume controls at all. So I guess I should be counting my lucky stars. I even got a volume control with this thing. But yeah, this will at least give us the ability to turn the thing on and off. And there was already a hole there anyway, so it wasn't as if I was, damaging or further damaging the value or anything like that. There was actually already a hole, so we may as well put a switch in if there's already a hole. That was my thinking. I did go ahead and remove the depth cap, which we can see here. Again, this is a Chicago Condenser Corp, made in Chicago, Illinois, of course. This was the 0.05 at 400 volts, and it was removed from here to ground, I believe. if I remember correctly. So we've got done away with that. Now let's take a look at what was done with the speaker, the grill cloth, and let's take a look at where we ended up mounting that output transformer. Okay, here's the front of the amp with the new grill cloth installed. I got this grill cloth, I got actually way too much of it. I got a whole yard of this stuff. It's real similar to the only other picture I could find online of this specific model. I think it was on eBay in Europe or something like that several years ago, so I wasn't able to even get a real close-up view of it. I just saw it on a Google image search. And that's the only other example of this amp I've even ever seen, and that's how I knew that the grill cloth was about this color, kind of a wheat sort of a color. So I found something that's very similar and pretty strong. It's for upholstery. Moved the speaker mounting screws, or bolts rather, over from these points. There were extra holes actually drilled where someone had put in probably like a 6x9 or something at some point, and you can see the remnants of the holes here. I'm actually in the process of filling these right now, and this isn't completely done, so you can kind of see it at a halfway stage. What I've done is I've filled these holes in with some wood filler so far, and so far the wood filler has dried and shrunk. So there's actually still a little bit of a dip there, and what I'm going to do is build that up again over the course of probably today. Put some more filler in here and kind of level it off, and hopefully when that dries, the next time it will be pretty level with the rest of the surface, and then I can come in here with some touch-up paint and actually paint over these little spots with some white. Where, you know, I mean, you're still probably going to notice that there was something there, but it won't be as prevalent. So at least when you look at the front, it'll be as aesthetically as pleasing as possible, and as original as I possibly could make it as well. These are the original mounts, the mounting bolts. So at least those are still original. I did replace the handle, which we can see here. The original handle hardware, it was covered in white paint, and rather than try to strip that off at this time, I just opted for some hardware that I already had on hand. Replaced the handle with a nice leather handle from Antique Electronics Supply. You can get these same handles, and this is probably very similar to the one that was on it originally. I still had the original handle, but it was so worn and so dry rotted that it was virtually useless, so it's been tossed. And plus it was painted over in white as well, which is no good. So that's been rectified. Now here's the back of the amp. We can see our original tubes are still in here, and these tubes, I'm pretty sure, are original to the amp. They are all Jan tubes, which is Joint Army Navy, and there were a lot of Joint Army Navy labeled tubes which came onto the market right after the war, and this being a 1947 amp, that pretty much jives with that sort of time period. This is a cover for the 6. I think it's an SL7. Yes, an SL7. Again, Jan labeled tube, and the Jan tubes are typically a little more rugged than other tubes that you'll find that are vintage, because they were pretty much tested for military use. They were put through. They were actually made a little better in a lot of cases, and the quality control was definitely better. But these were specifically made to go to war, to be in radios, to be in, airplane equipment, to be in whatever else, bomb sites or whatever else they might be used for. But anything labeled Jan is usually going to be a better tube for that reason, because they were specifically graded for military use. The speaker is a 6-inch Jensen Alnico 5 replacement speaker. This is one of the newer made in Italy variety. I couldn't find really any online for sale that looked the part and I thought would work well, so opted for a new Jensen Alnico. An Alnico speaker is for an amp of this age is probably about as close as I'm going to get to the original tone. I think originally this would have been an Alnico speaker with the output transformer mounted to it. Speaking of output transformers, we can see the output transformer mounted to the top. Because the cabinet is so thin, and I don't know if you can see that or not, but the wood on the cabinet is very thin. I'm going to try to get on the edge on here so you can see how thin that is. If you try to put a screw through that, you have to use a very, very tiny one, otherwise you'll go all the way through. So what I have opted to do here is use one of the existing mounts for the handle here for one side of the transformer, and then the other side, this is a very tiny screw which is essentially just kind of holding this side on. I wouldn't yank on that too much, or it may even come loose. That's how small the screw is, but it's just holding that side and keeping it from wiggling around. This side is doing most of the work, so of holding that transformer on. This is the original transformer, dated 1947. The manufacturer code is 160, so I guess we could look that up a little later if we chose. The 23rd week of 1947 on that transformer. So that gives us a very specific idea of the year this amp was made. We can also see the fairly well preserved schematic once again on the side here. Nice to have that, because at least then I know what circuit I'm dealing with. Makes it a lot easier when I have to go inside. Now this amp had not been even touched on the inside. This was all original from what I could tell on the inside, so I didn't have any trouble with trying to identify you know, where someone had monkeyed with it and tried to put it back to stock or any of that stuff. It looks to me like it's been, I think I've probably been the first guy to touch the inside, and that's just been to replace that power cord, which it had to be done. Now, I will say one thing that was done, of course, was the speaker output. But other than that, nothing else appeared to have been done. But here you can see the switch that was installed in place of that speaker output, which was installed by someone else in the past, and it looked like the distant past as well, because the little jack was really corroded, and it looked like it was almost as old as the amp. So it looked like somebody had taken this amp and said, hey, you know, instead of using this little 6-inch speaker, maybe I'll try to put this through a bigger cab, which, I mean, may not be a terrible idea. And it may be something that we could do in the future. If we wanted to use this with another cab, we could actually come in here and just remove these. That's actually why I've done this here. I haven't direct soldered these connections. I've actually made them where you can disconnect them. So if you ever wanted to plug into something else, you could just disconnect these, plug them into another lead of some kind, and roll with roll this as a head. But yeah, there are the internals and the externals of the amp. Now let's see if we can bring this thing up on the Variac very, very slowly over the course of several hours, maybe even a whole day here, and see if we can salvage this electrolytic can. My guess is we're not going to be able to do that. Again, I was getting some noise, so we'll see if that's even possible. But yeah, stay tuned for that, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, here we have the amp open, and we have it hooked up to our Variac. Right now our Variac is putting out, let's see, we can actually see exactly how much we have going on the primary side. We'll hook one of our leads here to the white coming out of the wall, and I have this around 39 volts, it looks like, on the Variac over here. We can test exactly how much we got. Put it over here. Actually, we need to change to AC on our meter. So let's check the AC volts coming out of the wall, being allowed into the amp rather, by the Variac. We see there are 43 volts AC. So that's our primary. Let's put our black lead back to ground here. And let's test the voltages that we're seeing on the secondaries. First of all, the electrolytic cap is here. Here's the biggest value that we should see. Actually, let's change it back to DC for this purpose. Angle it where we can see it. We're getting about 121 volts at that node. 118 volts at this node. And about 96 volts or 97 volts at the third node. Let's come over here to our tubes, and let's see, 1, 2, 3. This should be our power tube plate, and we are indeed getting about 121 volts right now on that plate. Over here we should see about 88 volts at that plate on the preamp, and it should be about the same, yeah, about 88 or 89 volts on the other plate of the preamp tube. Another cool thing we can do, we can actually check these capacitors and make sure they're doing their job. I suspect these are, even though they're ugly, I suspect these are still fine after all these years. We noticed we had 88 volts on this side of the cap, and the cap is just there to couple the two stages and block the DC voltage from getting to the next stage. So if we look at this side, we're getting 88 volts DC. If we look at the other side of the cap where it comes out, it's hooked up right here, and we are getting 0.33 volts DC, which is virtually nil. So we know this cap is doing its job. It's blocking 88 or 89 volts of DC from getting to the other side. So that cap is doing its job. Now let's check the other one. It started out here. Again, we can see getting about 89 volts DC. If we follow it over, it actually hooks up right here to the volume pot, and we're getting 0.64 volts DC out the other side, so that's virtually nil as well. And this cap is also doing its job. So I know I don't have to replace that cap or that cap, and we can move along and see if we can still try to revive these. So what I'm going to do over the next several hours here is steadily increase our input voltage via the variac, and we'll keep testing. I actually have another clip lead that I can put to this lead, and we'll hook it up and measure at certain intervals to make sure that everything's still progressing. But we're going to try to revive this electrolytic very, very slowly over the next probably many hours. And I'm not going to film all that, obviously, make for a very boring video. But we'll check in periodically and see how we're doing. And at the end, hopefully, we can have a revived original electrolytic can that we can just keep with this amp and keep it as original as possible, minus the switch and the other couple little changes. So I'll check back in with you, and we'll try to do that. Okay, we're back with this thing, and after some careful work to try to get the old can capacitor to come back to life, it just wasn't going to work. As a matter of fact, I've gone ahead and replaced all 3 of the 10 microfarad caps that are in this and bypassed them. The resistors that were dropping resistors in the power supply have been moved over here to the socket. The 5Y3 has a couple of unused no connection pins that I've used for these resistors. So that was somewhat convenient. Everything's grounded over to here. I've added, replaced, as you can see, I've also replaced the other capacitors, the couplers here. This capacitor down in here has been replaced as well, this little 25 microfarad bypass capacitor, and also I've added a 25 microfarad bypass capacitor on the 6V6 tube, which has beefed up the tone somewhat as well. This is a very slight mod that's very easy to undo if we decide to undo this later, or if a future owner decides to undo this. It's very easy. You can just clip this one out to return to stock values. But this added seems to have beefed it up a little bit, and even with a 6-inch speaker in this amp, it's pretty darn loud and sounds really good. So couple little things I need to do. I need to come back in here and try to get this ground a little better. The transformer is a little bit loose, so I need to tie this to a little bit of a firmer ground in here, but other than that we should be okay. But yeah, that's what's been done, and let's take a listen to some of the tones. Okay, thought it would probably make a bit of sense to get a sense of scale with this amp. Here's the guitar I'm using. You see this is a 52 Telly. The body of the guitar pretty much covers up the amp, so that gives you an idea of scale here for this whole thing. that's a little 6-inch Supro combo from 1948.